Okay, so it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker this afternoon, Professor Helene Mohr from the Free University of Berlin, who's going to talk on vanishing theorems for a Tau series.
Okay, so thank you very much. So please thank Dina Carr on my behalf for the kind invitation. And the other organizers. And I'm glad to be here. And I was glad to have the opportunity to read the posters of the young people. It's very nice. So today we do a journey in arithmetic geometry, which roughly starts with Grothendieck and which comes to our days with Peter Scholze. Taken on a specific example, which is really at the core of many theorems in arithmetic geometry, which are called vanishing theorems for étale sheaves. So varieties, or more generally schemes in algebraic or arithmetic geometry, are usually studied by defining invariants, trying to group the varieties with similar behavior of those invariants. Among them, there are various kinds of cohomology theories. Maybe the oldest one where people were working with was cohomology of coherent sheaves. So this is more oriented to classical geometry, enumerative geometry, and this relies on the work of Serre and Grothendieck in the 50s. Then Hodge theory for complex varieties, so this refers to the mixture of topology and holomorphic properties in the 40s for Hodge and Deligne in the 70s. Then p-adic Hodge theory, initiated by Serre and Tate in the 60s, and developed to a great extent by Jean-Marc Fontaine, who unfortunately just passed away. In fact, things in the 80s, up to Peter Scholze in recent days, cohomology with twisted coefficients, etc. One very important point is to understand general conditions under which some of the cohomology groups vanish. This leads to the notion of cohomological dimension, and this is our topic today. So that's the table of contents, because unfortunately I could not manage to put those fat points 1, 2, 3, and so forth in front of the text. I had to put them at the beginning, so for this reason I show it now. We will start with Grothendieck in the 50s, go to Artin in the 70s, go to Artin Schreier in the 20s, summarize the situation, which was then came to a still stand till 2012 when Peter Scholze came to play. And he invented a completely new kind of vanishing theorems on which I will say something. And let us start with Grothendieck. So one very important, so here basically we are doing enumerative geometry. We want, for example, to know whether given some points in the projective planes, there is a curve passing through those points with a certain multiplicities, a certain kind of local behavior. And all those conditions are computed by cohomology groups and cohomology of coherent sheaves. So it's very important to know when they die. And Grothendieck had a very slick way to think of it. So assume X is proper, and for simplicity of the discussion, we will assume that X is projective. And then if it is projective, we can always realize X as a finite cover of the projective space. And then it reduces the question of the vanishing of cohomology with coherent with values in coherent sheaves to the question, to the case where X is a projective plane. On the other hand, on the projective plane, once we give ourselves coordinates, then we have a privilege open sets which are given by the non-vanishing of those coordinates. So, for example, if we are over P1, then we fix a coordinate x0, x1, that fixes 2 points. And then we have the open where we remove this one and the open where we remove this one. Or in dimension 2, we will have a triangle and so forth. So the complement of those coordinate hyperplanes are affine spaces, basically by definition. And then one refers to Serre's vanishing, on which I will not say how it works, but essentially, once we have an affine space and we have this divisor at infinity, as we twist more and more our coherent sheaf, we can produce more and more sections the way we want. And this is a way we kill the cohomology, because Serre's vanishing also proves that the cohomology we are looking at is the same as Čech cohomology. That means it is computed by a cohomology of sections of the sheaves on affine opens. And then, because we have d plus 1 affine opens, this complex has length d plus 1. And that gives precisely the vanishing here. So for example, to make it concrete, let us denote by U0 here this open where we remove this one, U infinity where we remove this one, then we will have a complex to make it very concrete, which is like this. Mapping to the sections on the intersection. And this section, this complex has length 2, and consequently we don't have any cohomology starting with 2. So this is really most elementary vanishing theorem. More interesting is the cohomology of topological sheaves for many reasons. One reason is because this produces a complete analogy, which is in fact more than an analogy. It's also a bridge between, for example, complex geometry and arithmetic geometry. So geometry, for example, over the rings of integers like we had yesterday in these lectures. So, and then we are looking at cohomologies, the topological cohomologies, that's cohomology in local systems. So if we do complex geometry, we look at complex local systems, or if we are over Q, or Q local systems, or étale sheaves in general. So, so this was just to show you point 2. So the first extremely important, so Grothendieck's vanishing theorem is not so important. It is important, but maybe less important than Artin's vanishing theorem. And Artin's vanishing theorem, there are 2 ways to think of it. Either one thinks in the framework of complex geometry, using the Riemann-Hilbert correspondence. And then we assume that curly V here is a complex local system. And then we can compute the cohomology of this complex local system via cohomology of its de Rham complex, of the de Rham complex of the underlying regular singular D module. And this way of thinking, which works over the field of complex numbers, is, gives an evidence for the truth of Artin's theorem in general, because we had Serre's vanishing before, and Serre's vanishing implies, because of this hypercohomology formulation here, that this cohomology dies above the dimension. So you remember, maybe I'll write it here, we had Grothendieck here. So let me just write like this. We had X proper of dimension D and F coherent, and then the cohomological dimension was D. That means we had vanishing of cohomology beyond D. And Artin's vanishing here, according to what happens over the field of complex numbers, if X now is affine, is sort of the opposite situation, but we consider topological sheaves, then again, the cohomological dimension is D. But this way of thinking cannot be applied in arithmetic geometry, and the proof of Artin is of absolute beauty and extremely simple, at least with our understanding today. So let me say one word. So if x is affine, we may realize it again the way we were realizing a projective variety as a finite cover of the projective plane. Then any affine variety is realized as a finite cover of the affine plane. This is called Noether normalization. And this reduces the problem to AD. And then if we project further to A1, in fact, it reduces the problem to A1. And at the same time, once we are in A1, it's very easy to see that it's enough to understand the problem. If we have a sheaf here, topological sheaf, which is just the extension by 0 outside of finitely many points of a local system. Now, and in fact, even an irreducible local system. So now this irreducible local system can have any kinds of coefficients, finite coefficients, complex coefficients, if by accident we are still over C, all kinds of coefficients. And now we want to kill this cohomology, the second cohomology, that's the only one which might survive. And this is written here, that duality is telling us that the cohomology we want to kill, at least the dual of it, lies in the zeros cohomology of the dual local system. So in particular, if this irreducible local system is not trivial, this kills this cohomology already. And if it was trivial, then it would be spanned, this cohomology would be spanned by the class of a point which one can put at infinity and consequently it dies on A1. So that's a proof of Artin, or at least a simplification of the proof of Artin. So lambda here is a constant torsion sheaf of order prime to the characteristic of K, yeah. K is a ground field. So it's a priori stronger than the Riemann-Hilbert approach, coming back to Serre's vanishing. If the torsion order is equal to the characteristic of K, then the vanishing is even easier, and this is a vanishing which is coming from Artin-Schreier theory. So let me write the Artin-Schreier theory here, so I abbreviate with Artin-Schreier. And now the assumption is going to be that X again is proper. So Artin S is affine, in coherent theory X is proper. Artin-Schreier theory X is proper, and nonetheless the coefficients are not coherent sheaves, but in fact they are very close to coherent sheaves. That's the étale sheaf Fp. And why do I say étale sheaf? For the following reason. So if we are over a field of characteristic P and we take a function, a regular function on our variety, then we can say this function is constant with values in the ground field Fp, if and only if it fulfills the classical equation x to the power of p equals x. Why is that? Because that's precisely the equation of the congruence fields Fp, or the Galois fields Fp. Furthermore, the cover of x, which is defined by the equation which is written here, so x is our given regular function, and we look at the cover which is defined by this equation Tp minus T equals x, in fact is étale. So what does that mean, étale? It means it's unramified, and we all know the Jacobi criterion for a map to be ramified or non-ramified. The Jacobi should be invertible, but here the Jacobi is just -1 because the derivative of T to the power P is P times T to the power P minus 1, where in characteristic P is 0. And the derivative of minus t is -1, so this Jacobian is just -1, and consequently it is invertible. And consequently this is unramified, and it has also finite fibers, so it's a finite étale cover. And as a consequence, the sequence I have written here is exact in the site, in the topology, if you like, the Grothendieck topology, which is built by those finite étale covers. And that has a consequence that when we look at this étale cohomology with Fp coefficient, it is squeezed between the cohomology of O in cohomological degree 1 less and the cohomology of O in the same degree. But now by what we said before, the cohomology of O dies beyond the dimension because this is coherent. So that gives precisely the vanishing of this group here, except for I equals D, where we need an extra little argument which I don't give now. So let us summarize the discussion we had so far. So Artin for U affine over an algebraically closed field for étale shifts. So there's one thing I forgot to mention here to underline is that all those theorems here, for the coherent theory, it is completely irrelevant what kind of field we take here. We can take any field here. It can be algebraic, it can be perfect or non-perfect in characteristic P. It can be algebraically closed, not algebraically closed. But the moment we do étale cohomology, that means topological cohomology, then it becomes very important to distinguish the influence of the geometry of the variety from the influence of the ground field over which the variety is defined. One is Galois theory, the other one is étale cohomology, which is more general. And here the vanishing concerns only the geometric part, so we always assume here that the ground field is algebraically closed. Well, in fact, for this one it is irrelevant, because we just observed before that the Artin-Schreier theory reduces the vanishing of cohomology with FP coefficients to the vanishing of the coherent shifts, which is a structure shift of the variety. So if we summarize the discussion here, then Artin for affine variety of an algebraically closed field, Artin-Schreier theory for X proper over K equals K bar. So in fact, I wrote K equals K bar, but we just remarked that it's not necessary. In positive characteristic for the shift Fp, if the characteristic is P. So it's a strong constraint. We are characteristic P and we look at étale cohomology with Fp coefficients. So there are all the vanishing theorem for étale shifts were new until 2012, when Peter Scholze developed his perfectoid methods. So I must say I'm very honored to speak at the inaugural conference of this extremely beautiful building, but one should tell the architects that one should never put a screen in the middle of a blackboard like this, because one cannot work here. So I will use this piece of the board here to now to explain the idea of Peter Scholze. So now this idea was developed not only for the beauty of it, because this is one of the technical ingredients he used in order to prove his remarkable theorem on the existence of modular forms associated to torsion classes. So precisely étale classes with finite coefficients. So now I'm going to explain a completely new idea, which is due to Peter Scholze, and which is documented in his 2014 ICM contribution. So let me write here Scholze, 2014, and we will come back to it more precisely. So here we need more. If you look at this list here, we need, again, we are going to do topological cohomology, and X is going to be proper, but in fact more is requested. X is going to be projective. Now the field under which Peter is working is a characteristic zero field. So let's say K. Again, we don't do any arithmetic. Really, it's no Galois cohomology. So the field is algebraically closed, and it has characteristic zero. And we will discuss this in a minute. And then he gives himself, it's projective, so it is inside, it's a closed subvariety of a projective space, but more is given, namely the coordinates, as in the discussion at the very beginning in the coherence theory. He gives himself the coordinates, so Pn, so let's say x0, xn. And then, you know, the projective space, it's the simplest possible variety. It exists over Z as a scheme, which has good reduction everywhere. But more is true. It's a toroidal variety, that means it's a compactification of a torus. And once you give yourself those coordinates here, then this defines for us a torus, which is just, so I have, sorry, this is due to the architect here. So let me define T to be just xi not 0 for all I. So that torus, in fact, so it's a group scheme, it's an abelian group scheme, which is affine. And he gives, we give ourselves now maps here, which are finite, in fact flat. We didn't define what is flat, but we did define what is étal. It's going to be finite and étal over the maximal torus here. And this is defined from Pn into itself. Let me denote it by phi lower r upper n, the n referring to the dimension here, and r referring to the following definition. To x0, xn, we assign x0 to the power p to the r, blah, 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 xn to the power p to the r. So that means we take the rth root of all coordinates, piece by piece, and we make r larger and larger. And we denote here the fiber product by xr. So that means x is defined by the vanishing of certain homogeneous polynomials, and we take more and more roots, piece root of the coordinates of x, and that gives xr. And now the vanishing of Peter-Schulze is the following. If we assume what is on the board, which was written here, that the characteristic is 0, then it is the case that the co-limit over R of the étal cohomology here dies for I more than the dimension D of the variety. So this is a completely new theorem, because we think that the cohomological dimension of a projective variety for an étal sheaf is always 2D. It cannot be any less. If it's affine, it is D. That's a fantastic theorem of Artin. But if it's a projective, in fact, you can reconstruct out of the affine the fact that it is really 2D. And in fact, you just take the 2D cohomology spanned by the cycle class of a point. So this is not vanishing. But all of a sudden, he is telling us that it vanishes in the limit. So this is really a completely new way of thinking. And here let us recall that this co-limit here simply means that any class at a finite level XR here dies at an even larger finite level XR prime. So I being at least T. So now let me discuss here his way of obtaining his theorem. So I will have to erase here the history, even though in fact part of the history is quite important in his thinking. Also at the end, the formulation is radically new. So let me explain a few ingredients of his ideas. So he obtains a theorem as a corollary of his theory of perfectoid species. He does not detail, so let me make a little history here, it's going to be important in a minute. He does not detail the proof in his ICM 2014 contribution, but his argument is documented in his work. And let me say one word about the argument. Recall that one assumption is here is that the characteristic is 0. Now, by the classical in quotation marks, that means classical theorem, classical in quotation marks, that means theorem due to Deligne and Grothendieck and the whole SGA school, we know that the étale cohomology here does not change if we best change our field to any other larger field of characteristic 0, which is algebraically closed. So for this reason here, by first descending to a field of finite type and its algebraic closure over Q, and then going to a completion here, we may assume here, so without loss of generality, we may assume that the ground field here, which is algebraically closed, is an algebraic closure of a p-adic field, where the P here is precisely the P which shows up in this theorem. So that's the first reduction here. Now something happens, which in fact, unfortunately, because we don't have enough board, it has disappeared here, but which was already hidden in the presentation I had done, is that I wrote here by this crucial comparison theorem, we can say that one cohomology is almost equal to another cohomology. So let me first focus on the left-hand side here. So we have here this inductive limit. And then we twist by a very large ring here, modulo P. So we know that the p-adic valuation of QP extends to any finite extension. It's in a unique way, consequently to the algebraic closure of QP, and consequently to its algebraic closure. So if we P complete here, we know that Krasner's theorem implies that this is algebraically closed, and usually specialists denote this by C. So it is a valued ring here. It's a ring with a valuation in which P, by the very definition, lies in the maximal ideal, so we can look at this. So this ring here is huge. And then there's a theory of faltings on which I cannot say anything, and in particular because I'm not so knowledgeable about it, is that there is a notion of almost equality, which is due to faltings, which equates, now the fact that it is equates with something else is not faltings, it's due to Peter-Schwarzer, which equates with another cohomology here, and let me write here just coherent. And let me comment a little bit. So I have written here this, this funny letter, this German X here, and then the plus function mod P on this German X, and the German X here is precisely the very specific point of the situation here, is namely, when we look at this tower, we have X, let's say X which is equal to X0, and then we have X1, and then we have X2, and so forth. Peter-Schwarzer assigns to it a topological space, and in fact he calls it space, which has specific properties. And first, it's a topological space, let me denote it by curly X here, or German X. And it has a property which is quite remarkable, because the topology here is just coming from the étale topology at each level. So we know how to define a pro-system of topological spaces. That is nothing new. But what is new here is that he assigns a space which lives above this tower here, so let me write like this, with the extra property that, so it's a scale, it's not a finite type, but the fact that it's not a finite type enables him to show that there is another topological space. So this one lives over C, and there is another topological space. Let's say here what it's like this, flat, but which lives now over a pure characteristic P field. And with the property that if we just look at the topology here, the topologies are the same. So he is able to assign to this tower of topological space, topological in the sense of Grothendieck, it's the étal site here, he is able to assign a space which dominates everybody and which has the limit topology here. So this one lives over C, but which has a property that there is another topological space which is equally not a finite type, but which lives over a characteristic P field. Now, if it was the case that this other scheme here, which is not a finite type, was coming by a similar procedure of schemes of finite type in characteristic P, then in order to prove this vanishing here, one would just apply Hartin-Schreier theory here, as I explained before. Because I would compute FP cohomology in a tower of varieties defined over FP, and I know that the cohomological dimension is precisely the dimension of the variety. So if it was the case that these spaces, which he calls the tilt, he assigns to this curly X, was itself coming from a tower, one could conclude. But it's not always the case. In fact, if it was always the case, he would have proven the monodromy wet conjecture of the Line, but he could not do it in all generality. But what is true is what is on the board here is that you can forget here this remarkable idea of his here, and he proves directly at the cohomological level that even in absence of the understanding of how to construct this, whether or not it comes from a finite level, then it is a case that this cohomology behaves like a coherent cohomology. And then this is a crucial let me call vanishing theorem, or comparison theorem, if you like. And as a consequence, one obtains the vanishing here. So, okay, so I hope I could at least make it concrete, the idea, or at least some aspect of it. And now in his remarkable ICM 2014 contribution, Peter Scholze asked, is there a more direct proof? And in fact, because the players of his theorems are all classical invariants. We are looking at FP étal cohomology of a variety defining characteristic 0. We are looking at a flat tower here, which is étal over this torus. Those are very classical situation, and it is. He doesn't say really strange, but he suggests that he has thought quite a lot whether there is a more direct proof, which is also a way to ask what is really new in the theorem. And, but he does not answer this question. The question is posed as a question. So I give another proof without perfect geometry. Ah, I forgot to say, maybe let me insist, is that I hope I made it clear that his proof go from characteristic 0 in spirit to characteristic P, even if we cannot go directly to characteristic P. So that means it yields his vanishing theorem. Let us show it again, which is written here. It yields his vanishing theorem in characteristic 0. On the other hand, the formulation begs for a generalization in any characteristic. But his proof cannot be transposed to positive characteristic because he needs the construction I was explaining before. In fact, more is true. You can also, first you cannot apply the method, but more is true. You could also ask the question, one cannot use his method, but maybe one can deduce from his result the result in positive characteristic, maybe. But that cannot work for a very simple reason, because we learn from the linear, Grothendieck, we learn that cohomology is upper semi-continuous. So the cohomology goes up by specialization. So if we have an information, a generic information, we will not be able to specialize to finite characteristic. So let us come back to Peter's question, is there a more direct proof? So we give another proof without perfect geometry, and of course, what we win is that Peter Scholz's absolutely new kind of vanishing theorem holds in any characteristic. So I leave the sheet like this, the slide like this, I apologize. And let me comment on the tiny little other board here. Or maybe, in fact, yeah, but if I bring down this thing here, is there a way?
Yes.
Yeah, but it doesn't go up, right?
No.
Ah, that's the second thing you should tell the architect here. You know, nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect. So I erase Peter's vision here and proof.
You can write underneath.
For me? No, but I want to keep the definition of the XR, because if we don't have it, then there's nothing left in the discussion. So let me give an important ingredient. Naka?
Yeah, no, I was going to say, pull down the thing first and write on it and then push it up.
That is also true. No? That is also true. But that request a little bright from the speaker. Bright is
No, but
not
this
always
side is
available.
totally empty, so you could do that on this side.
Ah, on this side, yeah.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you for your help. Okay, so let me give you 3 points of the proof. It took me a while to understand how we could do, and let me explain why. So, because in fact, as I said, it looks really like a problem. I mean, a problem à la Deligne. So one feels home and one wants to solve it. And there's one specific feature here, I can write here on this side, is you remember this cover here, restricted to the maximal torus here, is, I said, finite étale. But in fact, more is true, because we extract the p to the power r's roots of the coordinates. The cover here restricted to tr, so let me, to t, I apologize. In fact, it is Galois. So let me write here, I hope everybody can see. So this is Galois. But a Galois of a very easy kind. It's sort of not, I don't want to say the way, I apologize. I don't find the word. It's a Japanese mathematician with a Z. The Z are towers of number fields. But don't worry. Iwasawa. Thank you very much. So it's a sort of Iwasawa theory, geometric. Because what is a Galois group here, this is precisely Z to the power, divided by P to the power R, and the whole to the power N. It is very easy. And as we make R larger and larger, then at the limit, the Galois group is, this is Zp to the power N. So in the limit, let me write infinite here for limit, then the Galois group is going to be Zp to the power N. Is that okay? But there is something which is very specific to our situation. Usually when we do algebraic geometry and we do a cover, and our Galois group is a product of groups, it is not the case that the various projections of this product Galois group to the single factors comes from geometry. In general, it's not the case. But in our situation, it is. So let me write this, it's quite important inside, is that there is something very specific here in the situation, is that the Galois group here, so let me write, now that you have me with a word here, Iwasawa to the power N, for short, in the limit. Then, if you look at the various, so I have written already, I have my coordinates. If I look at the various projections, they come from geometry. Do you agree? So, it invites us to write the following diagram. So we first look at our, we replace, it's an easy exercise, and this is very classical, to prove, do you have a question, Dinaka? So to prove the vanishing of Peter-Scholze, whether we look at cohomology of XR in the limit, or whether we look at compactly supported cohomologies, that means we look at the piece of X which lies outside, which lies on this torus, and we replace cohomology by cohomology with compact support, one can reduce the problem to prove the vanishing for the cohomology with compact support here. So I could replace here, once I have chosen my maximal torus here, let me denote by U, UR, and U here, I apologize, the board is awful. So it could be the case that X lies at infinity, but then you have an induction which is telling you that you can reduce to the case where X is irreducible, and in addition meets this open torus. And then it's dense. And then the problem becomes to kill the vanishing with compact support here. So let me write here. So the direct system over R of cohomology with compact support with F coefficients. This is the same problem. So now I come back to our crucial observation here, is that on this U here, so we start with U, so we first do a U, and then we just saw that we can map to GM. And so one of the factors here, which correspond to one leg of the Galois group. And then when we look at the whole cover map here to UR, then what I have written here is just saying that this whole, and with Galois group Z, P, R to the power N, then this map factors here to the corresponding map here at the GM level. That means in dimension 1. So we have here the PR. So we have such a factorization. That means whether we take the roots of one coordinate and then of the other ones is the same as taking the roots of all coordinates. So that means this diagram here, of course, you complete it. And let me denote by U prime R here the fiber product. So we have a projection here, let's say Q. This induces this projection Q prime R, and let's say QR. And now, of course, coming from the school I'm coming from, we do the Lorenz spectral sequence. We want to understand the compactly supported cohomology with FP coefficients of this U here. We will compute it via Q, via the Lorenz spectral sequence for Q, and then we will try to apply induction. So we will look at HI, and of course, our dimension here is D. And whenever you want to prove a vanishing theorem, so you want to prove vanishing theorem for étale cohomology with FP coefficients, in cohomological dimension, D plus 1, D plus 2, and so forth. The hardest one is, of course, D plus 1, because the one below, there is no vanishing. So the hardest one is D plus 1. So you are looking at HD plus 1 with finite coefficients with compactly supported cohomology on U. But you do Lorenz spectral sequence, so you have three types of groups which show up. This is this one, and then you look at relative cohomology, let's say D plus 1, and then here GM, pardon me, H1. And then RD, thank you very much. And then H2 with compact support, you can do it with me. And then we argue how to conclude. And D minus 1, Q shrink. Now, something new happens. You know, by induction, SGA is telling us that this sheaf here is a constructible sheaf. Now, and it has best change. By induction, on the dimension, the fiber dimension is here one less. So D plus 1 is more than the fiber dimension, and D is more than the fiber dimension. So by pure induction, we know that over the geometric fibers here, then this is going to die when we go from here to here for R large enough, depending on the point of the base. For each point here, we produce a subvariety. For R large enough, depending on this point, the fiber is going to die. But now, those sheaves being constructible, they are local systems on an open. So, in fact, all those R's are the same on an open. But the complement of dense open in GM, it's finitely many points. So that means this way, we produce an R which is finite, beyond which, in fact, not only this cohomology here is going to die as we go here, but more is true, the sheaf is going to die. This sheaf here, which comes from this cohomology, when we pull it back, there will be an R which is large enough such that it dies. The image in the corresponding sheaf here is going to die. So that means the classical SGA theory is going to deal with this term and this term. Now comes, but not this one, because it's a principle, as I said, for vanishing theorem, is that it's always, by induction, one can argue for cohomological degrees which are far from the borderline, but now we are at the borderline. D minus 1 is the dimension of the fiber, and there is no induction hypothesis because this is D minus 1. In fact, more is true. The sheaf blows up When you look at, I made 1,000 examples to understand what was happening. When you look at this sheaf here, and you look at the same sheaf, in quotation mark here, it gets larger and larger, and the image of this sheaf here into this sheaf here survives. So the only way to kill this cohomology is, here we kill the cohomology by just killing the sheaf. It's a classical argument. But now, and now comes a new idea, the only way we have to kill the sheaf is by using not only the sheaf, but using the cohomology of the sheaf. And that is why I wrote, but I cannot do that. But I remark that in this diagram here, we want to kill this cohomology here by going to the corresponding cohomology here for the sheaf coming from this map. So it would be completely enough to kill this cohomology, mapping to the corresponding cohomology here, but for the sheaf coming from this map, because we have a factorization. This diagram, I wrote it in a way that it should suggest to you that it behaves like the Frobenius, relative Frobenius and absolute Frobenius. So, but if we do that, that means, as I said, there's no way to control the sheaf. I cannot, and in fact one cannot. But what is true is that if I go only halfway here, then I don't change anything because it's a fiber square. I have a sheaf here and I have best change here. So I don't control the sheaf, but I keep the same sheaf. Now I remember that I want to compute H2 with compact support here. And now you compute H2 with compact support of a sheaf which is a constructible sheaf. It's a local system on an open. The complement is finitely many points. So in fact, the compactly supported cohomology of this constructible sheaf is the same as the compactly supported cohomology of the part which is a local system on a smaller open. So now we have a local system here, and we have best change here, and we want to understand what happens if I take the H2 on the smaller open, and I take the inverse image. Notice this local system here on this smaller open, this local system has nothing to do with this R. I mean, here I can go as high as I want. I keep the same sheaf because the sheaf is coming from here. But to look at the inverse, now we have duality theory, to look at the inverse image via H2 with compact support is the same as looking at the trace of H0. H0 with values in a local system, which I don't control, but it is a local system. And now that's the trace via a linear operation of the cyclic group of order P to the R, with values in a local system of Fp, of Fp vector spaces. But this is H0, so that means this H0 has dimension which is bounded by the size of this local system. And this size is given by this, it has nothing to do with this R. So now you look at the action of cyclic group, Zp to the R, acting on an Fp, vector space of dimension fixed, let's say, bounded. And then, you know, the PCLO has bounded side. So if it has bounded size, if you make R very large, the action of Z to the P, modulo P to the R is going to factor through the modulo P to the S for S strictly less than R, and that kills the trace. Okay, that's the end of the proof. And the proof works in positive characteristic, and now we come to an interesting question, is that after, very recently, Peter, together with Bart and Christian Schnell, they computed Scholz's vanishing theorem, replacing the projective space and the tower of maps which we had by taking the roots of the given coordinates. They replace it by looking at the multiplication by p. And they raise the same question. And they conclude, they have the same conclusion. This is Scholz's vanishing theorem, holds true, but it holds true via a purely transcendental argument, using, I apologize, that the uniformization of an abelian variety, as we know, is a vector space, complex vector space in complex geometry. And a complex vector space is a Stein manifold, and the fact that it is a Stein manifold is going to do for us the vanishing theorem. I believe that one can apply Peter's methods also with perfect ordered geometry, but at the end of the day, one knows the vanishing in characteristic zero using transcendental methods, maybe also using perfect ordered methods. But then they ask the question whether this is true in positive characteristic. And unfortunately, so I wrote, we do not know, because our methods strongly use that the projections here are geometric, while on an abelian variety, of course, the Galois group is the same. It's also a Nasubayar situation. But it is not the case that you can separate the direction of the Galois group. So the proof here does not work. It does if the abelian variety is a product of elliptic curves. So now I still have 2 minutes. So in those 2 minutes, let me say 2 things. It became a big industry. The people who are close to Peter Scholze. There's a group of 7 people, those articles written by 7 or 8 people. I was alone, there were 7 or 8 for one article. So you can also pose a question on Shimura varieties, because you have a naturally defined pro-P towers, which are coming from the level groups. And in fact, initially, Peter Scholze proved the vanishing for a specific kind of Shimura varieties. It's good I have no time because I will not be able to repeat. And then a huge group of people managed for one other Shimura variety to prove the same thing. So it's a group of people. I'm not able to tell you the words, and I didn't look on the internet, but at any rate, one is Anna Karayani. And more importantly, maybe geometrically, is that one would like to understand on abelian varieties, and right now we do not. And I asked Peter, I asked him, what is really behind your vanishing? I mean, clearly he proved an extraordinary theorem using it, but what was in your mind, so to speak, when you had this formulation? So he answered this. So on applications for Shimura varieties, the corresponding statement was not known, and it's a type of non-abelian Leopold conjecture, which is relatively simple in the Shimura case, but unfortunately, I cannot really comment on this because I don't understand enough of the Leopold conjecture. So it's precisely 3:30. Thank you for your attention.
Are there any questions?
So for the abelian varieties, does it get easier if you use CM abelian varieties?
To use
CM. I know you do the product of elliptic curves, but
yeah, product of elliptic curve, CM abelian varieties. I think I have. So I apologize. I already did mathematics. There was no history at the end. You know, the main point here is in the proof. If I was to replace this projection here by a projection to a larger dimensional variety, for example, GM square, for example, then the proof which is here would break down. Because in the Lorentz spectral sequence, we would have, here we have only H0, H1, H2. The only term which is not dealt with by induction and SGA is H2. And fortunately, H2 is the same, H2 with compact support, the same as H0, as I explained. And then we have this fantastic thing is that our H0 is bounded, and that's the proof. But if our base is higher, let's say a surface, just dimension 2, then we have more terms, and then it does not go through. The proof does not go through. The top term is annihilated in the same way, but we still need the annihilation of the next one, next to the top one. Those ones are dealt with in induction, but the next two terms.
You could keep H4 maybe, but not H3?
Yeah, H4 is fine, but H3 I'm dead.
Yeah, okay.
Well, at least I could not. So in particular, even an abelian variety, so it's not exactly an answer to your question, but it indicates a kind of difficulty. Even an abelian variety of dimension 4, which would be the product of two abelian surfaces, at least without further thought, I could not do it. So in fact, I tried to think very concretely of the case of an abelian threefold, because that's the first case. In fact, I can say one thing which is really funny. If you have 2 minutes of attention, it's a beautiful, so that's pure geometry. Let me show you one beautiful thing, which is behind, I should have started with this, which is behind Peter's...
You can raise the board.
Thank you. No, I use it already, no? No, I didn't. Thank you very much. Let me show you one thing, because that's going to show you where the difficulties start. Let us do better on P2. Start small, okay? And now, let us be very modest. Let us take P equals 2. Of course, 2 and 2. Okay? And now, let us be very modest. The X we take is a simple X. In P2, characteristic 2, let us take just, we are in characteristic 0, I apologize, but the P is 2. Let us take a quadric. Not a quadric, I mean the degree 2 conic. Is that okay? I mean, we do a simple geometry. So we have our X here. Okay? And now in P2, we had said we had those three, this triangle of coordinates here, hyperplanes. And, but let us take our X, which has a property that our triangle is tangent to this. Can do that. Of course, it's a specific case, but is that okay? So this is x0 equals 0, x1, x2. Fine. Now let us do better. So take the roots of the second root of x0, x1, x2. And just the first one. Let us be very modest. So with our notation, it was this. So now what happens to our conic? Can you tell me this? There are students here. So we have a conic. We take the root, the second root of the tangent here. What happens? You know, generically, if we take a conic, or in fact any curve, and we take a finite cover here, we take the pullback curve. Generically, if we take the curve very generic, it doesn't mean anything, but let us talk like this. Then the curve we obtain is connected, generically. We take random equations, you have the feeling it's going to be connected. But now, the thing is very specific. And you can compute by yourself. I don't want to do it because I don't want to use our tea time. But let me finish this because it is of extreme beauty. And once you have understood this, you have understood at least one part of the deepness of the theorem. Is that in this case here, when you, this degree here, you remember it was sigma 2 cross sigma 2, so it has degree 4. So our cover here, it has three possibilities. Either it is irreducible, or it is, because it's Galois, or it disconnects, it is a union of 2 degree 2 covers, or it disconnects completely in 4 copies of the same conic. And now, when you take the situation where the lines are tangent, in fact, you compute easily that it disconnects completely. Now, and as I said, if they were not tangent, we would have 2 cases. The generic case would be that we would have something of degree 4 like this, okay? And the half generic case would be we would have 2 things like this. I apologize for my drawing, it's not very convincing. But now we all know what is a cohomology with F2 coefficients, eta cohomology of F2 coefficients of a curve. I mean, we are looking beyond the dimension is 1. So we are just looking at H2. But that's the only cohomology we have at disposal. But H2, this is one of the first things we know. The H2 topological of a compact curve is spanned by, irreducible curve, is spanned by the cycle class of 1 point. Do you agree? So what is Peter telling us? He's telling us we take a point here, okay, that's the cycle class of this point, and now we look, that's the generator of H2, so let us write. So we have our conic here, F2, this is F2, and let me call it little x here, little x is here, or little a, because x was the name of the coordinates here. So now, the inverse image in the tower, the first level of the tower, is just taking these points here and looking at its inverse image. But the inverse image here, whatever I do, is going to be this. And, but now, what is H2 of this? It's a disjoint union. So it is just H2 here, H2 here, H2 here, H2 here. So this is each time F2, F2. So I have 4 copies of F2, so 4-dimensional over F2, span at each level by this point, this point, this point, this point. They are all equal in cohomology. So in fact, the map here, Scholze is looking at, is just a diagonal map. It sends 1, it sends 1 or A, if you like, 2, 1, 1, 1, 1. Does not die. So, but it does in the other example where the lines are not tangent, because if you do the same exercise, you have here your cycle class here. Now this one pulls back here, but now on each component, because it has degree 2, it pulls back like this and like this. So that means the pullback of this cycle class is twice this point here, because all the points are the same in cohomology. But we are looking at cohomology with F2 coefficients, so this is 0. And here even more, because the pullback is 4 times, okay? So what does that tell us? It's this very simple example, is that our conic disconnects here. And if it disconnects, Scholze's theorem is not true at this level. Nonetheless, clearly Scholze's theorem is true. So what does that mean? It means that in the tower, maybe it does disconnect at the first level, maybe even at the second level, maybe even at the third one, but eventually it will not disconnect completely. Because if there is one component which does not disconnect completely, then by Galois invariance, then all the components will play the same role. And that will kill the pullback of the cycle class. So that's the content of Scholze's theorem here. And this part of Scholze's theorem you can compute by classical methods of geometry. Enumerative, I mean, you can do projective geometry, you can prove that. But you see already, so we are looking at curves in P2. More generally, these arguments would hold if we were looking at H2D. That means the top cohomology of a d-dimensional irreducible subvariety. This argument would hold true because it's always spanned by the cycle class of a point. So we will have to show by projective methods that in the tower, it is not the case that the variety always completely disconnects. And then not completely, it's enough. But if you take the intermediate cohomology, D+1, D+2, this is very hard. No one has generators of those cohomology. And in particular, this is not the case that those cohomology groups are spanned by algebraic cycles. It's not the case. So it becomes very difficult to understand why, nonetheless, Scholz's theorem is true. And we have seen that Scholz's theorem is true, at least in characteristic P, thanks to his perfectal geometry. And more generally, it is true for reasons which are by no means trivial, because behind there is a SGA. This is SGA7. This is by no means trivial. The new argument which I try to underline, this one is much easier, and it usually not in this framework, so it comes as a surprise. But of course, this is not no vanishing theorem, it's an easy vanishing theorem. So I hope the example here was enlightening.
Are there any other questions? Okay, so,
Let's go to